I'm Ruby Stevens Morgan. Good afternoon to everybody. I am the Director of Strategic Planning and Analysis with the Coordinating Board. I've been with them for about 8 months. And I've worked in institutions, in institutional research, and also K through 12 and in universities in other roles. So I'm really familiar with the work that you all do at the institutional level, and understand your challenges, and especially when it comes to data. And so one of the things that we wanted to do, and at this point, we received a Lumina grant, and we've been doing some equity work at the coordinating board level. And so we wanted to bring some of that to you all in terms of equity and how we talk about data. And especially at this point, we are advancing the discussion to talk about qualitative data. So after a couple of introductions from the coordinating board staff, we will then be ready to get started with the training. So first up is Elizabeth, and she has, you all have gotten communications with her for these meetings and getting everything organized for us. So at this point, Elizabeth will introduce and say hello to you all.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Elizabeth Shivers. I recently switched positions, and I am now in our newly created project management and improvement office, but I have been working with helping coordinate our regional efforts now for a while. I have been with the coordinating board for about 1.5 years. Before that, I was at one of our institutions. I worked at Navarro College as the director of institutional research, and I've been in higher ed for quite some time. So I'm excited to have everybody here today, and I hope you find this useful and interesting.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And next we have Luis. He will introduce himself. He will come back later and tell you all more about our interactive dashboards for the regions. Luis?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad to see everyone here. And I'm also going to be very excited to show you our dashboard and let you play around with it towards the end of the session today. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luis. And then we have Claudette, and Claudette is the point of contact for your region. And she is going to just welcome you all and say hello as well.
Good afternoon. I'm just going to introduce myself briefly. I'm Claudette Jinks. I'm the Director of College Access. I've been with the agency for over 13 years. My role at the agency really involves a lot of the college readiness and success initiatives. So I manage a portfolio of programs that really work with the direct to college initiatives. So I wanted to let you know that if you need any assistance in that, obviously you can contact me. I assumed the role from Ginger Gossman not too long ago, but we are excited to reestablish working together with you, and let us know if you need anything. We want to continue our efforts in the Southeast region. So thank you for being here and joining us today.
Thank you, Claudette. So at this time, we will go ahead and turn it over to Rachel, and she will get us started on this equity training. And then immediately following that, we will have the introduction and introduce the dashboards and have some Q&A to answer specific questions you all have. So at this point, Rachel, I'm turning it over to you.
All righty. Thank you so much, Coordinating Board, for having me today. Thank you, Ruby, for the introduction and for your continued support in the sessions, the learning sessions. I want to first acknowledge what is going on both inside this room and also outside of this room, and that's the Black Lives Matter movement and the continued murder of Black folks in this country. This session is absolutely 100% one way that we can show up during this time. And I want to name for us right now, and you'll hear me say it a bunch during the session, but it is okay to not be okay right now. It's okay to be distracted, to be frustrated, to be grieving, to be amped up. Whatever you are feeling and grieving and processing right now is 100% okay. And I ask that today you listen, you ask yourself questions, and you also commit to being engaged today. So, thank you. Let's go ahead and get started. First things first, I want to know who is in this session. Who are you? Who is in this gallery view that I'm seeing? So I would like for you to create your name tag right now if you have not already. And how you create your name tag is you either click on participants at the bottom of your screen, click more next to your name, and click rename. Or you can go into the gallery view, click those 3 little dots at the corner of your screen, and click rename. But I would like for you to rename yourself with your first and last name or your first name and last initial if it's not already there right now. That way I know who is in this session, and most importantly, we are going to be using cold call a lot today. And so I will need to know who you are and what your name is. So Stacy, you're my number 1. You're already set up and ready to go. Looks like Andrea has changed her name. Thank you, Andrea. Mark, appreciate it. Gonna write your name down for cold call, so get ready. Claudette, you're perfectly there. Thank you. Just waiting on a couple of more folks to rename themselves. And if you're having any trouble, you can take yourself off mute and ask me, or jump into the chat if you're having any trouble renaming yourself. Mark, thank you. Morgan, I see you. Lovely job, y'all. Okie doke. Cynthia, do you need any help or you're good? I'm gonna take your silence as you're good. But luckily I can decipher your name and I got it. Let's go ahead and move on. Thanks for changing your names and giving me your name tags. I want to just quickly hear, where are y'all from? So I know that Claudette, you're from the coordinating board, and we've got Andrea from Lamar Institute of Technology. Could you take yourself off mute and tell us, where are you from? Oh, looks like Pam is off right now. Mark, would you take yourself off mute and tell us, where are you from? Mark is from Lamar State College. Thank you.
And this is Pam. Can you hear me?
Yes, Pam, I can hear you. Thank you for taking yourself off mute. Where are you from?
I'm also from Lamar State College, Port Arthur.
You're also from Lamar State, is that what I heard?
Lamar State College, Port Arthur, where Mark Knowles is from.
Lovely. Okay, great. Thanks for being here today, Pam. Awesome. Well, we are going to go ahead and jump into our agenda today. And I would love for Morgan, if you can unmute yourself, go ahead and read us our agenda today. Morgan, I'm looking for you to unmute yourself and go through our agenda today.
I'll volunteer to contribute since Morgan doesn't seem to have a working mic at the moment.
That's okay. Andrea, thank you. I appreciate it. Go for it.
So it sounds like today we're going to continue with our welcome and any additional acknowledgements that we have going on for this group, what the community agreements look like between us and the region, just kind of why we're here today, and you know, why did you come and why are we meeting as a group here? Today's objectives include working towards equity in education. So that's what part of this training is about. And then towards the end, some feedback and question and answer time.
Lovely. Great job. Thank you, Andrea. Are there any questions so far that anyone has about today's agenda? You can either drop those questions in the chat, or you can take yourself off mute and ask at this time. Okie doke. Here are our Zoom agreements, and you already see or noticed me using some of them today. These agreements are really going to allow us to make the most of our virtual learning session. And so I am asking that one of our agreements be 100% attendance, just like if we were in person. So we're treating this learning space just as if we are in person. I want you to bring your whole self. If you need to excuse yourself at any time, please make sure you do that in the chat just so I know what's up, just like you would do in an in-person session. Finally, I'm asking that you all be all in, all in. So you'll notice a couple of moves that I'm already making, and I'm gonna explain a couple of more moves that really are gonna enhance our learning today. So as much as you put into this session, I believe you will take out of this session. What that also means is monitor your mute. So I'm gonna let you be in charge of your mute, but please take yourself off mute when you're trying to talk. Just be mindful of that. Now these next 3 Zoom learning agreements we're actually gonna walk through right now. I have already noticed that this group, we're a little bit camera shy. Let me acknowledge that right now. We are gonna be using our camera today. So I expect all of our participants today to be on camera. I see a few of us are already there. Let's go ahead and practice. We are gonna all take ourselves off camera. So we're gonna 100% take ourselves off camera. Looks like Pam is already off camera, and so is Elizabeth and myself, of course. Go ahead and take yourself off camera. And go ahead and put your camera back on. Lovely, excellent. I love seeing your faces. Thanks for joining us today. Hello. Great, we are gonna be leaving our cameras on. So we are here, we're gonna do this, we're gonna be interacting with each other. I really, really appreciate you being on camera today. Awesome. The next thing we're gonna be utilizing is the chat. So a lot of our conversation, I will ask you to let me know what you think in chat. But one of my agreements here is that we will stay off chat when we're in the session. And then when I ask you to use chat, go ahead and use chat. That way, me and my co-hosts from the coordinating board aren't going back and forth between the chat. So let's go ahead and practice. Tell me one word about how you are feeling about today's session. Type into the chat, either to everyone or to me privately. How are you feeling about today's session? Interested from Claudette and from Andrea. That's great. How are you feeling? Elizabeth says timely. Absolutely, Elizabeth. Pam says interested. Okay, folks, we got a lot of interested. Ruby says hopeful. Give me something different. Stacey says ready. Let's get started. I love that. Curious, says Mark. Oh, from SFA. Great. Okie doke. And now, cold call is in use. So you'll see me asking you to use chat, either privately or with everyone. And you'll also hear me say your name and ask you to unmute yourself. So I would love to cold call on, let's say, let's hear from Mark. Mark, if you could unmute yourself, tell me about this curious feeling. Can you explain why you're feeling curious?
I was part of the workshop you did for the reporting group, the state reporting group to the coordinating board. So I'm just wondering how this is going to be different. I know it's different, and I'm just curious about how it's going to compare.
Absolutely. Mark, I appreciate that curiosity. I hope that you are 1,000% impressed. I hope it is a different experience for you. We're definitely doing different activities today. And so I love that curiosity, and I also accept your curiosity as a challenge. So please let me know at the end of today's session what felt different, what worked for you, and then maybe even what didn't work for you so much. Awesome. Love the thumbs up. Thank you, Mark. Okay, so we talked about our Zoom learning agreements. These are our learning agreements. So these learning agreements help us guide the type of work that we're going to be doing today. I want us to focus on I statements, only speaking from our own experiences. Oftentimes when we're talking about race and equity and issues of identity, we want to talk about other people. We want to talk about people from outside our groups, but I'm asking you today, use I statements, speak from your own experiences. It's my assumption that when we know ourselves, we're able to know others more. So I really, really want us to get into who we are today. I also want us to own our impact. What that means is so often we will have a difficult conversation and we will say the words, "That's not my intention," or "It wasn't my intention." And yes, intent is important, but in these conversations today, we are prioritizing impact, the impact of your words. We're also going to be seeking to understand. This one is especially important when we're talking about our own experiences. So I can only speak from my experience as a Mexican-American woman growing up in Austin, Texas. And I want you to seek to understand that experience, my experience. And I'll do the same for you. So I'm really not trying to think of what I'm gonna say when somebody else is talking. Instead, 100% listening. Finally, this is my absolute favorite learning agreement: accept and expect non-closure. You will not get all the answers today. In fact, you may be leaving today with more questions, more frustrations. And so this is just a good one in life, to accept and expect. You are not going to get closure from every single conversation. And you will certainly not get closure on these big, big topics from today and from me. Think about those learning agreements. Which one are you going to be prioritizing? Write it down in front of you. Write on a sheet of paper. Ooh, I see some of you starting to get that pen out. And then in breakout rooms with one other person, I want you to explain to that person in just 1 minute which learning agreement you are prioritizing and why. Which learning agreement are you going to be prioritizing and why? Cynthia, I know that you were by yourself for a little bit, but you have got one other person in your breakout room. Okie doke, we should have folks joining us now. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for taking yourself back on video and joining us again today. I hope that was cool. I want to hear from Pam. What did you discuss with your partner, with your group? What are you prioritizing today?
Well, both Mark from Stephen F., not Mark from LSCPA, Mark and I both said we were going to use I statements to help us own our positions and not to project blame. And also because I've known Mark, it was nice to catch up briefly. I will own that. So.
Beautiful. I appreciate that, Pam. I'm so glad that you've got a colleague here with you that you recognize. We are going to be doing a lot of colleague connection time, so I'm looking forward to that for you. And it sounds like, is it Mark from SFA or from,
well,
what's
Mark
the other?
Jones is my day-to-day colleague, a very good colleague at Lamar State College, Port Arthur. But I know Mark Gibson from this regional group, so I enjoy meeting with him as well. So he's Mark with a C.
Lovely, lovely. I'm glad that you made that differentiation for me. And it sounds like y'all are going to be using I statements and seeking to not place blame on others or on other institutions. Really love that. Thank you, Pam. So why are you here with us today? And what do you hope to get out of today? I want you to answer one of those two questions in the chat right now. Why are you here with us today? Or what do you hope to get out of today? Go ahead and answer that in chat. And you can chat me privately or chat to everyone. Why are you here with us today? What do you hope to get out of today? Pam says it's always good to hear other perspectives, especially from colleagues in higher ed who are facing many of the same challenges. Absolutely. Stacy, I hope to leave with a greater sense of understanding. Claudette, interested in learning more about how we can have real conversations about equity. Claudette, I appreciate you making that distinction between authentic, genuine, active allyship and maybe phoning it in. Let's see, Elizabeth, a better understanding of why individual experiences are important to understanding equity. Elizabeth, thank you for that one. I like that. Awesome. Well, I hope that we can achieve some of those hopes today. And I appreciate each and every one of you being here and being engaged. So why are we here today? I've got three sort of grounding statements for my why. Why we are here today is to start a conversation. This is just a start for each of us in our regions of thinking about how we can apply an equity lens to our leadership. Just the start of a conversation. Also, we're here today to look at our own experiences. So we're looking at our own experiences as a starting place, really to humanize our own work that we're doing, and also so we can extend that same sort of grace and that same sort of understanding of intersectional identities to the folks that we work with, to the students that we work with. I also want to acknowledge that this work is a process and it takes time. I know this is not the only equity conversation you have had in your life. I know this is not the only cultural competency or cultural humility training you've ever had. And so I know that you have already done a lot of work, and I want to acknowledge that. And the work continues. The work continues in this learning session and in the learning that's happening outside of this session. I also want to acknowledge that even though some of us have the language of equity, and some of us might already be coming into this presentation thinking, I know this, I know this, I know this. Well, just because we have the language of equity, it doesn't always mean that we're living by equity values on a day-to-day basis. Or let me make this distinction clear, because I make this point all the time, it seems like, with my own colleagues. We need to move from the language to the labor. For far too long, we have placed the labor of equity on other folks. Today, we are taking that work on ourselves. So we're moving from the language of equity to the labor of equity. And you might be wondering, who is Maya? Maya is a team of excuse me, to be honest, I'm getting a bit distracted by what's going on in your screens. So please just be cognizant that with your video on, I can see what you're doing. Just experiencing a little bit of a distraction. Let me refocus. So Maya is a team of educators, and we're based in Austin, Texas, and we do our work through 3 primary work streams, and that's strategic planning, project management, and diversity, equity, and inclusion advising support. And so you see a little bit of that advising work here today. And I am a first-gen college graduate, multi-generation Mexican-American Texan. Sorry, I'm still experiencing a bit of distraction. Let me take a deep breath and refocus myself. I was born and raised in Austin, Texas, and went to DePaul University as a first-gen college graduate. And from DePaul, I really wanted to engage deeper in serving folks in marginalized communities. As I grew up first-gen and grew up in a low-income with chronic trauma, I was really hoping to learn more about others as a way to learn more about myself. So I started teaching with Teach for America in Detroit. And then I continued on teaching, but in my hometown of Austin, Texas, because I really wanted to teach my gente, my people. I realized that I didn't know enough. And so I went to Harvard to earn my master's, and my work really concerns the intersection of identity and lifelong learning. So I'm always interested in how do different aspects of our identity lead to lifelong learning outcomes. Here are today's objectives. It certainly seems like I need a breather, so I'm going to take a breather and I'm going to cold call Morgan. Would you please take yourself off mute and read today's objectives for us? Looks like Morgan is out, so I'm going to rely on Stacy. Would you read our objectives for us today?
Our objectives are to review equity as it relates to the education system and to connect our identities to equity-minded leadership.
Lovely. Thank you, Stacy. Fist to 5. 5, I know 100% what we're doing today. I feel good about these objectives. Fist or 0, I have no idea what these objectives mean. Or maybe 3, I'm somewhere in between. Go ahead and show me. Fist to 5. How do you feel about today's objectives? Ooh, I see a 3, I see a 5, I see a 5. 5, 4. 4, I like that. That's a little bit different. I will give you some understanding of these objectives and then we'll get into it. Thank you, Ruby. If you could send a message, I would appreciate that. Mark says 3. So our first objective is really about understanding the difference between the definitions of equality and equity. So we're going to dive in on those definitions. Mark, it's going to be a little bit similar to what we did before, but different. And then the bulk of our work is really going to be about connecting our identities to equity-minded leadership. And so that is going to be a lot of what we do today. We'll be investigating our own experiences. And then we're going to move into applying an asset-based lens to data dialogue conversations. Mark, that section is going to be completely different from what we did before. So get ready for that. Okay. Objective number 1, reviewing equity as it relates to the education system. And here I'm going to look for a volunteer. So I'm not going to cold call you. Instead, I'm relying on you to show off your smarts. Explain to me the difference between equality and equity. You've been in this work far longer than I have, so show me. What's the difference between equality and equity? You can take yourself off mute and explain the difference between these two.
Well, I'll bite. This is Pam. You know, I think we all love this drawing because it demonstrates it so well. Just that equity is about responding to what somebody needs in order to be successful, not about making sure that everybody has the same thing. And quite frankly, I learned that as a parent, that treating your kids the same wasn't the best way to make sure that all their needs were met. So yeah, it's about making sure that everybody has what they need to be successful. And that won't be a one size fits all.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you, one, volunteering and explaining these differences, but also that part of your experience as a parent and how that's when it clicked for you. The one size fits all approach is not effective. And so I thank you for bringing that here. Pam, I'm going to push you a little bit further. Can you help us understand, how do you apply the differences between equality and equity in your work with students or in your work with colleagues working with students?
Oh, okay. First of all, you might hear some music in the background because my special needs son is in the room playing. So anyway.
Awesome. Well,
an example of how my sons didn't all have the same needs. But, you know, in terms of my work as a vice president, I'm a little bit more removed from faculty, although I do work directly with faculty. But what I really love is working with the department chairs. And what I've seen is that when I came to Lamar State College, Port Arthur 2 years ago, they were all at different places in terms of having developed leadership skills and some other basic competencies in terms of, you know, building schedules and those kinds of things. And so I didn't do just these one size fits all trainings because they weren't all in the same place. I've really tried to nurture each according to his needs. And what we've also done is in some of the trainings we've had, we've kind of applied that to the classroom, that students don't all start at the same starting point. I mean, hypothetically, I guess that's what the Texas Success Initiative Assessment Test is supposed to do, make sure they're all the same, but they're not. Even though we've said, oh, they've all scored at the cutoff score, so they must be the same with regard to aptitude. We know that's not true. And so we've tried to capture examples of some innovative practices that some of the faculty have applied to make sure they're meeting needs of all faculty. So basically we just try and preach the importance of that and hold up examples of that to each other. So I'll shut up, but I'll just say that one of my English faculty, for example, had a student who was had, I won't say it was profound autism, but it was definitely not a, you know, light end of the spectrum. And he managed to pass English 1301 with a C, and not because she dumbed it down. She figured out how to respond to his needs in a way that let him express his competence in writing. So I guess that answered the question. I'm not sure.
You absolutely answered the question, and I can clearly understand that you are applying these differences between equality and equity, not only with your staff and understanding their needs, but also giving a light or amplifying the work of your colleagues, of your faculty. And so something that Pam said that really resonated with the work that we're going to do today is that if you don't know the students you're working with, the students you're partnering with, if you don't really know your colleagues on a human-to-human level, it sure is heck hard to respond to their equity needs, the differences that they need. Because we both know when folks really get to know us, when they know the inner workings of our heart and what we care about and what we're passionate about, then we can partner and do so much more work together. And so today is really about humanizing the work that we do, both with each other and within ourselves. And so I've got some handy definitions here. I'm going to fly through them because y'all are already on it. You already get it. But I want us to know that today we're going to really be focusing our efforts on utilizing qualitative data sets rooted in students' identities or in students' experiences and asset-based thinking in order to strengthen our equity work. So I'm going to give you some exercises today. We're going to practice some exercises today that really get at the heart of intersectional identities. And you've heard me use that term a number of times, and I want to level set and define it. Intersectional identities means that our identities have many different intersections, and we can't untie those intersections. We bring them all to the work that we do. And so today is really, really focused on identity, qualitative data, asset-based thinking in order to strengthen meeting the very different needs of each of our students. So here's a question for you. I want you to respond in the chat. You can either respond privately or to everyone. Why is it so important to keep the definition of equity in the forefront of our mind? And your colleague Pam really gave you a cheat sheet, but I want to hear from you. Why is it so important to keep the definition of equity in the forefront of our mind? Pam, it is so easy to fall into that one size fits all. Absolutely. Why is it so important to keep the definition of equity in the forefront of our mind? I know you're typing. I'm just waiting for them to roll in. Here they are. Andrea, so we can truly meet students where they are. Stacy, it's important to keep our focus on helping students to succeed. And that means we need to meet more than one set of needs. Absolutely. Hierarchy of needs plays into this asset-based thinking or understanding students' identity. Mark, in terms of higher ed, it's important in order to make sure that all of our students succeed. Absolutely. If a certain student has special needs, the student should be accommodated so as to have a realistic chance to complete their degree. Mark, I hear you using that example that Pam used. Absolutely, you're so right. All of us have different needs that need to get met within our classrooms. So we're going to be bringing that a little bit out today. Elizabeth, we have to see our students as they are if we hope to address their needs. 100%. So let's do the work. We're diving into objective number 2 right now. And I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll. I'm interested about this qualitative piece of our work. How do you gather qualitative data with your colleges and universities? How do you gain qualitative data from your students? We've got 7 participants here today. I'd like for every single one of us to respond to this poll. I want to know from you, how do you gain qualitative data from your students? And after this poll, we are going to be moving into our first exercise, so make sure you have a pen and paper in front of you. We've got 5 attendees who have responded, waiting on 2 more folks to respond. And let me know if you can't keep up, just let me know in the chat if you have any issues. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. So it looks like the majority of us gain qualitative data on our students through surveys, then assignments, and then interviews. Can I have somebody volunteer to explain to me what it looks like to gather qualitative data on your campus? If you answered surveys, let me know. What does that look like?
Well, we just did a survey of all of our undergraduate students to find out what advising services and related student support services they are actually using. And we also surveyed all of our advisors, both faculty and professional, to see which of those services they say that they are providing to students so that we could, compare results. And we did ask students for write-in responses as well as giving them Likert scale questions. And what we're really trying to do in particular is make sure that not just that they're getting class scheduling, but a lot more that they're being referred to any student service, whether it's career, professional development, counseling, disability services, our tutoring services, whatever they need, depending on their situation.
Great. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that response. And I'm going to name for us or flag for us today. The exercises that we're going to be using are going to be much different from the surveys that we would typically use to assess, as Mark is saying, whether students are using certain support services or not, why they're using that, and getting that qualitative data that way. Instead, we're going to be understanding how can we get to students' identities, track those identities, not so much in a punitive way, but in a way it's like, okay, I'm coding that a lot of our students are experiencing homelessness, or there's a set of our students who feel safest in different environments. I don't want to get off to examples that aren't useful, but we're going to be understanding how we can connect our students' identities to supporting them more. Okie doke. So for our 3 things exercise, this is our first exercise that I want you to think about, how can I use this on my campus? How can I use this with my colleagues, or how can I use this with my students? Go ahead and take out a pen and paper, and I want you to respond to these 3 things. Write down your responses to these 3 things. And I want you to be prepared to share in your breakout rooms each of these 3 things. So I will give you just 1 minute to write your responses. And if you finish before 1 minute is up, just give me a thumbs up. I can see y'all really working hard on this. I am going to go ahead and put our breakout rooms together. And I want you to share with the colleague in your breakout room every single one of these 3 things. And I'll send you to breakout rooms for just 2 minutes to share out.
Rachel, before you do that, it's Ruby.
Hey, Ruby.
Did you forget something that we're not supposed to share?
Oh, I have changed. I've changed the purpose of this exercise.
Oh, sorry.
Hey.
I've been around too long.
You're okay. And looks like we've got our 2 Marks, Mark Knowles and Mark from SFA. We are in breakout rooms right now, so when you're ready, go ahead and hop into your breakout room. Welcome back, everyone. Back from Breakout Rooms. Thank you for sharing your 3 things with the colleagues around you. And I want to hear from you now. And I'm asking for a volunteer. Unmute yourself and share with us, how do these parts of you show up in your work? How do these parts of you show up in your work? Okay, Cynthia, I'm going to call on you. Cynthia, how do these parts of you show up in your work? Okay, Claudette, I'll lean on you. How do these parts of you show up in our work, or in your work rather?
So a lot of my own experiences I try to build on when I'm thinking about how to, because one of the things I'm passionate about is increasing students going into higher education, because I know the importance of education and the workforce and a successful life. So I use a lot of my own experiences and how I've maneuvered through things in my own work a lot of times. And of course, the people, I'm also a first generation Hispanic female, come from low income first generation student. So a lot of that and a lot of my experiences, I tried to build on those things to help others that are in similar situations, and then also learn from different perspectives and things like that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Claudette, for being our guinea pig there. I really appreciate it. Something that Claudette said that really resonated with me, and it looks like we have some affinity places that we share, which is awesome, but that we can be a mirror to our students, right? When we know different parts of our students, we can recognize those different parts within ourselves. And we can share with our students, hey, I've been there, I know what that's like. Let me tell you what's worked for me. Maybe it'll help you. Maybe it'll work for you. And for those of us who feel like, my identity is very different from my students, but I still have a heart for them, absolutely, 100%. And I know that there are parts of you that you share with those students that you serve that may be different than what's on the surface. I want to name here that students so deeply want to be known. They want to be known by the colleges and the universities that they attend. They chose your college, they chose your university for a reason. And they so deeply want to be known by your institution. And so what does it mean for our students when they can't fully be themselves on campus? When they don't feel safe on campus? When they don't have an adult on campus that they can trust with these different parts of themselves? And I'll ask that question again, and I want you to just hold it, and then we'll move. What does it mean for our students when they are unable to show up as their full, unique selves on our campuses? I'm now going to share where I'm from, and this is our second exercise. Mark, you've seen this exercise, but we're going to get a little bit deeper on it today. I'm going to share a part of who I am, and I'll share my poem written about who I am, and then I'm going to charge you with writing your own poem. And you will share that poem with colleagues, and we may be going into a deeper, more emotional part of our place. And I want you to look for, what do you have in common with your colleagues? Or that same old question, what shows up for me at work? So, pulling it out of my desk, this is where I'm from. I'm from Pots on the Stove, from Bluebell Ice Cream and Quaker Oats. I'm from the red brick 2-story, trailer home, duplex, and the woods behind them. I'm from aloe vera plants, growing wild against a broken down red truck. I'm from Great American Cookie Cakes on Your Birthday and Curly Brown Hair. I'm from Roxanne and Salvador. I'm from Talking Too Loudly and With Your Mouth Full. From Get Your Elbows Off the Table. And I'm so proud of you. I'm from Church on Sundays, Fried Chicken Sundays, Nap All Afternoon Sundays. I'm from Austin, Texas, and San Luis Potosí, Mexico. Barbacoa tacos and barbecue chicken. From Papa Granda running away from the police with his shoe shine kit. The scar on my brother's lip and the other on his eyebrow. The pictures of family members now gone. The yellow cigar box sitting empty. The UT football cap unmoved from the altar. In the front room, sacred elementos honoring those that came before. Now I want to hear about where you're from. I want you to take 5 minutes to write your poem, but stop at from family name and other family name. Stop there. I'm only expecting you to write until there. So if it was my poem, I would stop after I am from Roxanne and Salvador. Okay, I'm gonna leave this template up, but give me 2 seconds to also give you the link, just in case you want the link in the chat. And I will start our timer now. You have 5 minutes to write. You have just about 2 minutes left. Just 2 minutes left, and you're stopping at I am from, name a family member. We have about 45 seconds left of writing. If you need more time, just tell me in the chat how much time you need. Okie doke, and that is our timer. I'm going to go ahead and put us in breakout rooms. Okay, welcome back. Y'all just snuck up on me there. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being back and participating in that exercise. I was with Stacy and Andrea. Thanks for allowing me to pop in and ask a few questions in y'all's room. Stacy, when you were listening to Andrea's poem, was there anything that you had a connection with as Andrea shared, or are there any points of connection for you? If not, what was coming up for you as you wrote your poem?
There were definitely some points of connection. She talked about ivies, which reminded me of the huge plant stand my mom used to have growing up. And yeah, I mean, it's amazing the common threads, and sometimes it's simple things, and sometimes it's just, you know, the act of reflecting on things I don't think about just a whole lot.
How do those parts of you show up in your work? How does the ivy show up for you in your work?
You know, I try to remember that our students, I mean, I'm at a community college, our students juggle a lot of things. And from when I was in the classroom, they tell you things that I can't imagine juggling what they juggle. There's so many issues with life just getting in the way, and they persevere, and they're trying to make their lives better for themselves and for their children and for their parents, and they carry the weight of the world sometimes. And it's easy to get caught up in the statistics and, you know, what you think your average freshman coming into college is going to be, but that's not necessarily our average student. And it's just always good to remember that there's layers that you can't see unless somebody really wants to open up. And even when they do open up, you can't necessarily do anything about it. I mean, I've had students drop because their car breaks down and they can't fix it. And nobody can solve that problem easily. So it's a real challenge.
Absolutely. Stacy, you said so many things that resonated with me so much. Thank you for sharing. Now I know that you're going to be somebody I'm going to be calling on again. Stacy, to that point, could you go ahead and read this quote for us today?
Living our identities is much like breathing. We don't have to ask ourselves each morning who we are. We simply are. Identity is never fixed. It continually evolves. But something in it stays constant, even when we change. We are recognizably who we have always been. Identity links the past, the present, and the social world into a narrative that makes sense. It embodies both change and continuity.
Thank you, Stacy. Our students are always changing, and there's always parts of them that they are grappling with in our institutions. And so the work that we have for us today and for always is to get behind those different parts that they're grappling with, and how can we partner with our students to better support them, to increase their learning outcomes. We're now going to transition into equity-minded leadership. What does it look like for us to apply an asset-based lens to the work that we do? So we know, yes, getting to know our students can have a major positive, beneficial impact on their learning outcomes. But how can I further the way that I talk about my students, the way I think about my students, in order to increase those learning outcomes? So I'm going to give this paradigm of deficit thinking and asset-based thinking, and they're not opposites. They're not opposites at all. Instead, it's a way to think about, or a way for us to embody the values of equity-minded leadership. So deficit thinking sees deprivation in students, most often in communities of color or in students of color. And so I heard Stacy talk about how when freshmen show up on our campuses, we may have so many preconceived notions or ideas or even data on who our students are. And oftentimes what we can do is see their needs first. What are they lacking? What are they not showing up with on campus? And instead, my charge is for us to see them a little bit deeper, a little bit wholer, and recognize that they are bringing a ton of strengths to the table that we have not yet utilized in order to positively impact their learning outcomes. So deficit approaches see deprivation, it overgeneralizes, and asset-based thinking instead prioritizes the strengths of students or the strengths of our colleagues, the strengths of the people that we partner with in our communities. So asset-based thinking is really, really recognizing what is already in our toolkit, what is already on our campuses, what are the strengths that are already here that we can build off of. This is our biggest key takeaway. Anything right in today's session, besides putting a smile on your face, I hope it is this: the way that we talk about students can have a major impact on the way we think about improving student achievement. The way we talk about students can have a major impact on the way we think about improving student achievement. I'm gonna hold that there. I want you to sit with that for just a bit. So when we're talking about asset-based thinking or asset-based approaches, it is super strengths driven. And the work that we're going to do today in a moment where we look at our data, we are not going to be placing blame. We are not going to be looking for further justifications. Instead, we are just going to look at the data and look at what the strengths are. We're going to look at opportunities, and we're going to look at what's in our locus of control. Finally, we're going to be really taking accountability for our actions in our institution. So often we can look at data and try to blame everybody else. Well, K-12, let's take a look at that. Well, pre-K, let's take a look at that. Instead of owning and taking accountability for our data. Asset-based thinking really asks the question, what is present that we can build on? So when you are in your campuses and working with your colleagues, that is a signal to you that there's asset-based thinking going on. When you hear yourself or when you hear your colleagues ask, what is already present that we can build on? What do we know has already been successful for our Hispanic students? What do we know has already been successful for this group of students? How can we replicate that success? Instead of practicing deficit-based thinking, which is often needs-driven, problem-focused, and places so much focus on what's happening around us instead of what's happening right here. Finally, one of the biggest traps that we can fall into is instead of taking accountability, we often blame the student. We may say things like, unfortunately, they come from communities that don't value education, right? We might hear things like that, and that's blaming our students and blaming the precious communities that they come from and ignoring or erasing the strengths that they bring to our table. Finally, deficit-based thinking asks this question. And I want you to think about the characteristics of deficit-based thinking when I ask this question. What additional knowledge, skills, or resources will we need to find to tackle these pressing problems? Some of you might be thinking, how is that bad? Well, it's not bad to ask for help. It's not bad to look outside of our locus of control for what's been successful. But what my hope is for you to do today is to look at what's already on your campuses, what's already inside of you, already practicing, that has produced results and positive results. So when you think of this, say this instead. And Mark, these are a couple of different examples than what we used before. So first of all, I want to say that in my limited amount of time in the education sector, but I've been here enough to know that we have been using this term achievement gap over and over and over again to compare our low-income students of color to their more affluent white peers. And I want to name here that it is not asset-based thinking to be comparing our low-income students of color to our white upper income peers, to their white upper income peers. That's not the comparison we're trying to make. The reason why is it erases the historical significance that our students of color have faced in our institutions. So we know our students have been denied quality learning experiences for generations. So instead of saying achievement gap, please start saying education debt to recognize what our students have been up against for generations and how we are either helping or harming those experiences. So when you see data, in just a moment, you will see your own data, not from the Northwest region, but from your region in Southeast Texas. You'll see a data point like this. 60% of Hispanic female first-time undergraduates graduate from public universities in 6 years. That's the data point. So how we apply an asset-based lens here is we're looking for successes, right? And we're also taking accountability. So what we would say instead is our region has successfully served. And that's literally what I want you to practice saying instead of saying, well, I need to know exactly how many Hispanic female students are in our region before I can even talk about this data. Or, well, I want to know what's going on in other regions because in our region, we are having X, Y, and Z experiences. No, 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 no. I want you to just focus on successes. Our region has successfully served. So now I want you to try. Here is your data from the Southeast region. I want you to capture this data on your own right now, either by taking notes or getting out your camera and taking a picture. Capture this data because I'm going to send you to breakout rooms to talk about this data. See a couple of you starting to write it down, take pictures, love it. That's what I would do too. And in breakout rooms, I want you to answer this question. Ooh, and we are back on time. How would you talk about this data through an asset-based lens? How would you talk about this data through an asset-based lens? I'll give you just 5 minutes to talk.
Hey, Louise, how are you? Hello? How are
Hey
you,
there,
Rachel?
Good, good. Are you having trouble joining your breakout room?
Oh, I don't know. We just now got here like 2 seconds ago, so we haven't talked yet. So I don't know. Louise may not have an audio going, but so I just gathered my snip. Oh, we got somebody else coming, so.
Okay, doke. Well, hold off for now. We're gonna have another opportunity for you to take a look at some data and figure out how to talk about it.
Okay.
Hi, this is Tanya Celestine. I was taking care of some other matters at work, so
Oops.
Great, welcome back everyone. I was able to spend just a little bit of time in each breakout room. It sounded like in Ruby's room there was a ton of great discussion going on and grappling with how do we translate this data using an asset-based lens. And I know Mark in the chat, I see you participating. You gave us a great example of how we can use an asset-based lens instead of using at risk, that problematic term. Now I want you to take a look at this data. So it's different from the data set that you just saw. Spend some time with it. And in the chat, same thing except with everyone now. Respond either privately or to everyone. How would you talk about this data through an asset-based lens? New data set. Thinking about building on strengths, thinking about institutional accountability. How would you talk about this data set?
Would you say that in the Southeast, community and technical colleges are successfully serving over 40% of Hispanic students?
I think that's absolutely correct, Mark. That really rolled off the tongue. You must have done this before. Ruby, Southwest data, not Metroplex. Yes, thank you, Ruby. Elizabeth, we have the opportunity to better serve 82% of African American students at
East region CTCs. Absolutely. Notice that Elizabeth's explanation is opportunity focused. It's strengths driven, just like Mark's example. I'd like to hear from some other folks in the chat. How would you utilize asset-based thinking when talking about this data? Pam. Pam, I see you. I really like this qualifier that you say about our students focusing not from students being college ready to institutions being student ready. I think that is absolutely a great frame. I wonder what has been successful for your Hispanic students at your institution and how you can replicate that to benefit other student groups or to benefit Hispanic students. Absolutely. Anyone else want to offer up an example of how they would talk about this data? Maybe Stacy or Andrea or Pam. Pam, I heard from you. How would you talk about this data?
I have more of a question. This is Claudette. What does it mean internally focused again? I may have missed it.
Yeah, great question. Asset-based thinking as it is internally focused, you're thinking about what is in my locus of control. So what are the tools and resources and people that I have access to in my office right now? Instead of saying, well, if only we had a consultant who could come here and disaggregate this data or whatever it would be. If only we could increase X, Y, and Z. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Oh, looks like we've got Stacy is saying we have the opportunity to improve the experiences and outcomes for more than half of the student population. Stacy, I think that's absolutely right on. But what I want to caution against for everyone is this is not just magical thinking or putting rose-colored glasses on. And Stacy, I'm not saying that you are doing that, but I want to encourage us to think about the daily walk and talk of our words and how we can so often make excuses or place blame instead of looking for opportunities, just as Stacy is signaling for us. We're going to pause here on the work that we've done with applying asset-based thinking to data. And I want to know where you're at. So it's my assumption that through further self-reflection, through further self-inspection, that is how we grow towards equity-minded leadership and being active allies or co-conspirators. So think about these 4 quadrants of questions, and I want you to take just 5 minutes to respond to every single question. When that 5 minutes is up, every single person is going to be sharing round robin, and you'll either share out to one question, whole group, or up to you. So give 5 minutes to respond to these questions. And if you have any clarifying questions on what these terms mean or how they're applicable to our conversation today, please chat me and I'll try to help you out here.
Rachel, I see a question from Andrea in the chat about what you're looking for on the stuck question. I'm not sure if you responded privately.
I'm responding to it right now.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And we'll take just 30 more seconds. Okay, by now you should have gotten an opportunity to respond to each of these 4 quadrants. We're going to go ahead and share out in the order that's in the chat, starting with Mark from, I put SAF, but I meant SFA. We'll start with Mark and then move to Stacy and so on. And if I left you off, please let me know privately and I'll put you on the end of the chat. You're just sharing out one area, one quadrant with the group. Take it away, Mark.
Okay. Well, okay, so with self, I don't know if this is what you're looking for, but for most of my life, I have spent a lot of time thinking about how being a Southern white male, whether I have been positive, indifferent, negative in terms of how I have related to Black people growing up. And I mean, I've tried to be positive, but it's hard, you know, and I have thought about that a lot. So I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but that's what I wrote down.
Mark, I so appreciate you sharing that with us today. And what I appreciate from Mark's response is not only his vulnerability in speaking about his experiences as a Southern white male, as he said, but also just that willingness to name his racialized experience. And so that is super, super powerful. And thank you, Mark. I think as we work towards becoming more active allies or equity-minded leaders, I think something for us as white folks to grapple with, and I'm a white Latina, right? So I occupy both spaces, is this question of not of niceness, but of anti-racism. So how can I move towards a place where I am actively anti-racist in my thoughts, feelings, and actions instead of I'm being nice? And that's because of the shared historical experiences that we have across our different identity areas. Mark, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Stacy, let's hear from you. Self, successful, stuck, support.
So self and stuck kind of overlap for me because I think about gender, and females are consistently outperforming males, and historically that has not been the case. And it seems like higher ed has successfully better met the needs of females than males, and I don't know why, and I don't know what to do to help males be more successful or to be more interested in higher ed. They're not enrolling as much as they have in the past either, and I'm just kind of stuck on that. I mean, part of it is probably financial, and there again, you can't help somebody's family income level by just saying you should go to school. You've still got more immediate needs that have to be met. So I don't know, that's kind of where I'm stuck.
Stacy, I appreciate you sharing that stuck. Do you mind if I ask a couple of questions?
Sure.
Are there resources that you have utilized yet to get unstuck specifically around these gender differences?
Not specific resources, no.
Okay, then I'll offer a resource.
Okay.
What's coming up for me right now is this issue of toxic masculinity and how our young boys and then our young men come into our classrooms with this idea that sharing that they don't know something, sharing that they're struggling with a certain concept can really, really, really be difficult for them. And so one resource that helped me better unpack toxic masculinity, it's gonna strike you as a little bit odd, but it really helped my own understanding. It's called Amateur by Thomas Page McBee. Amateur, and you and I can talk offline later, but I think that may be a starting resource.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Andrea, what about for you? What's coming up?
I think the first one that I wrote down, you know, in terms of support, really, since I'm very new to my role here, you know, I've worked at the university, I've worked at another two-year college, but really I need to spend some time getting to understand what our population here on campus looks like a little bit better. Since we've been on, I actually started my position during the middle of the stay-at-home orders. So I'm just very newly even getting to meet my staff. So I haven't had a lot of opportunity to connect with students, and I don't, you know, I just don't know who they are yet. And so some of these other areas will come to me a little bit more when I'm able to really connect with some students.
Thank you, Andrea. I hear that you're in the beginning stages of your work. I applaud you. Wow, making such a big transition during pandemic times. That is totally to be admired. And so I hope that in your beginning stages of getting to know your students, you can see them as wholly unique beings. And I hope that we don't write the stories for our students before we even meet them, and instead let them write their own stories. And I say that out loud for me and my colleagues, because so often I tell myself a story about the work that my colleagues are doing or the folks that I partner with, and instead I need to continue to humanize them and humanize the work that we're doing. Mark, I have your responses privately, and you can tell me in chat whether you would like for me to share them publicly or not. It's okay if you want to keep them private. I'll respond to them privately as well. So would you like for me to share them publicly or privately? I'm just giving Mark a moment to type his response. Thank you, Elizabeth, for that resource. I'm going to keep Mark's comments private for now. Claudette, what's coming up for you?
So I'm not at a campus, but there is something that I'm stuck on is gender. In a different respect to Stacy, is for instance, I manage the Apply Texas. That's a state application for admission, and there's been a couple of colleges that want us to make changes to address some sort of neutral rather than identify a gender specific to create other categories. That is something that is difficult for as a state to address, not only for reasons of, I mean, primarily for this discussion around data. So if we add other layers of categories, for instance, there was a request to put in MX instead of Mr. or Mrs. or any other, and then the pronouns and things like that. So that has come up frequently, and that's something that as a state agency is still not really being addressed. And I really personally, in my own experience, wouldn't know how to address it either. It gets difficult when, because then with all the data that we had, and we just had a data set with male and female, if you're identifying in another category, then how are we to determine certain things? So that's where I'm stuck personally. And then that also leads to the race, with the Latinx movement. I, as a Latina male, Latina in general, I'm not pro Latinx. I don't understand that piece, but it ties into me to the gender discussion. So, those are the challenges what I'm stuck on.
Thank you, Claudette, for offering those stuck pieces. For a moment, if I may, I'm going to think through these or riff through these with you. Great, I see you shaking your head, yes. I think first when it comes to gender, what research tells us is when students who identify with a gender different from the one that they were assigned to at birth, whenever we use their correct pronouns, it significantly reduces rates of suicide and depression. And so there's tons and tons and tons of research out there that tells us by using the correct gender terms, it is validating and it saves lives. So how can we as institutions catch up to that knowledge and validate our students? I don't have the answers. This is an accept and expect non-closure moment, but I know, Claudette, that the folks in your region are also struggling with that same stuck piece. Because when you were talking, I saw your colleagues shaking their head yes. Absolutely. And I think when it comes to Latinx, you're right. It's 100% the same thing. I identify as Chicana, I identify as Latina, I also use Latinx. And the reason why I use Latinx, and you know this because you've been in these conversations, is it allows us to use both and, Latino and Latina. And so it's a shorthand way. But I also know that it's really politicized. And so there's some like issues with using it within Latinidad. That's a whole nother conversation that we can have. But I want to name that that's how I see Latinx. And it's also a way to nod solidarity with our students who are transgender. So I'll say that. Let's move on to Pam. Pam, what's coming up for you?
Well, this is maybe kind of going down a different path, but on the stuck, different piece of my identity, I'm a clinical psychologist and a scientist, you know, and a data geek. And so data has always been important to me in my role in higher ed because, you know, it's not good enough just to do what we think will work. I mean, we need to know if something's working and having an impact. But here's where I get stuck. Like even looking at the data we used here in our exercises, inevitably we group students, whether it's by gender, whether it's by ethnicity, whether it's by socioeconomic status, major, whatever you want to say. And yet we also keep saying one size doesn't fit all. And you don't want to say, well, we see that we are not effectively serving our male students. We're particularly not effectively serving our African-American male students.
Absolutely.
Therefore, you know, we need to develop interventions, and yet I'm a strong believer in the individualized, one size fit all is not the best approach. So you need to know your students and individualize, and yet we're looking at them in groups. And so it's not that the groups are invalid, but I'm always fearful that by looking at the students in groups, especially when those group labels are things that have been historically associated with disadvantage, I'm always fearful that you got to look at data, but I'm also fearful of losing sight of the individualized approach and not assuming that all students in a particular group need the same thing just because they're all female or male or, yeah. So that part of me, I'm always conflicted about it because I don't want to be a hypocrite. I don't want to say, well, we shouldn't be, you know, making assumptions about groups. Oh, I see our Hispanic females need that. I mean, you know, it's like there's a push-pull inside me about that. Does that make sense?
It 100% makes sense, Pam. What I hear you stuck on is really this issue of binary thinking. Mm-hmm. And so oftentimes we can get trapped in a either or situation, and it's actually both. Mm-hmm. Yes, it is so important that we disaggregate the data because we need to know that the experiences that our Hispanic students are having are unique to them and may be the same experiences that some of our white students are having or some of our Black students. And so it's both and. It's important that, yes, we disaggregate this data, and it's important that we look for trends, look for themes, and the biggest piece that I pulled out from what you were sharing with us is not making assumptions. Because deficit thinking tells us we often see deprivation, most often in communities of color or in our students of color. So when we're looking at the data, we want to actively work against already writing the story, already telling the story, already making assumptions about our students. That was a lot, Pam, and that was really, really useful reflections. Is there anyone else who is unable to share their reflections? I think we got everyone. Awesome. We are now going to be moving into the exit ticket, and then we'll be passing it off to the coordinating board. But in the same spirit of sharing, taking down cold call, taking down all of that, I'm curious, what will you take away from today? What engaged you? What will you do differently after today's session? Be honest. I'd love to hear from y'all. Just unmute yourselves and share out.
I think what really engaged me is the concepts of deficit thinking versus asset-based thinking, and choosing that as the framework of which I approach what I'm looking at, reading, when I, looking at data. So I think that's one that I'm really interested and excited to take on.
I'm glad to hear it, Andrea. Please continue to look it up online, get as many resources as you can, and continue to dive into that asset-based thinking versus deficit thinking. Absolutely, it's such a big concept.
To
What else?
follow up on that, I'm used to applying asset-based thinking to people or to groups of people and not to data so much. So having to reframe how we talk about data with the asset-based mindset is challenging and useful at the same time.
Woo, Stacy, I'm glad that you got a spicy challenge there. You're right, we so often use it with each other. Now let's apply it to data, because the way we talk about our students impacts the way we think about designing policies, practices around equity. Absolutely. Okie doke, folks, I am going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. You will see a link in our chat to everyone, and that is a link to our exit ticket data. So thank you so much for all of your hard work today. I'm really, really privileged, and truly, I feel really special and unique that I got to meet with each of you today and learn more about your experiences and share some of my own. So thank you. I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to the coordinating board while I drop that exit ticket link into the chat.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you for really engaging learning session, and thank all of you for just sharing your thoughts and your ideas. It's really important, because I think we learn a lot when we have those interactions and engaging conversations with each other. And so we really do appreciate your input, and we just encourage you to keep the conversations going. And as Rachel was saying, move from that language into the labor, because we know that's what it's going to take, and it's going to be ongoing. So thank all of you. So next we are going to get ready to make the transition to our interactive dashboards so that you all can take a look at those. And Elizabeth and Luis will take you all through this process, and then they will answer any questions that you have. So you are now in the hands of Elizabeth and Luis.
Thank you so much. So I think Luis isn't quite back yet. So while we're waiting for him to come walk us through the dashboards, I'll just briefly tell you what to, oh, I think he just came on. Are you there, Luis?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, good. All right, so what we're gonna do is we are going to introduce you to our new regional dashboards that have been built in Tableau. And we are going to ask for some feedback on your thoughts. So Luis is gonna walk us through some key tips on the dashboards. Then I will share a link where you can go play with the dashboard for a few minutes. And we're gonna ask for some feedback through poll on what you think. And as Luis is going through, if you see something that you really like that he's talking about, please give us a 5 in the chat. And if you see something that you're like, I'm not so sure about that, then give us a 1 in the chat so that we know that too, because we definitely want to make sure that these are useful for you. And then after we share the link and you get a chance to play a little bit, we will show you a second dashboard and then get your thoughts on that. So, Luis, if you want to take it away.
Okay. Let me share my screen. And when you can see my screen, just give me like a thumbs up, or just let me know you're able to see it. All right, looks good. Okay, well, I think it's appropriate because we're with higher ed folks and it's the start of summer school right now. I'm gonna start this off with a pop quiz. And it's one question that's worth for your entire grade for the summer semester, okay? And the question is, there are 4 higher ed regions who had an increase in educated population. Where do you think Southeast falls in that category? And I'll tell you where to find the answer in just a minute, okay? So don't worry, I won't leave you hanging on that. We'll make it open book. And here's the resource we're going to use for it. It's going to be our regional dashboards. We're going to share this URL with you in a few minutes. I want to walk you through some built-in designs into the dashboards that are going to help you with analysis, and then also walk you through some manual tips that you can use for self-discovery, okay? So once I do a few of those, I'll share or Elizabeth will share with you the URL, so you can go ahead and play around with it and use some of the tips that I'm going to share. So the first dashboard I'm going to share with you is the 60x30 TX regional dashboard. And I'm going to put this into full screen mode so we can see a little bit better, okay? So what we were striving to do with our dashboard views across either the regional or the institutional dashboards is we want to give you a clean look that's going to quickly engage you into the data. And some of the things that we did are, one, we included a navigation menu for you at the top. So here we're looking at regional targets overview, and it has a white background. And you see other menu options up here, like 60x30 educated population, all the way to direct enrollment, and those have a great background. The reason the regional targets overview has a white background is because that will alert you that that's the data that you're actually viewing right now. So this is the view that you're working with. And so what we try to do at each top level of the dashboard views is that we want to give you a succinct narrative. So we want to give you some explanation of what the data stands for and how you could use this, okay? And in this first view, what we're looking at is the 3 regional targets for our 60x30 plan, regional target areas, sorry. So we're looking at educated population, we're looking at completion, we're looking at direct enrollment rates. So we're at the bottom, we're looking at progress bars. Where did the region start? Where's in 2018? Where's in 2030? Well, right now we're looking at Upper East, which is okay, but let's change it to Southeast. So our first baked in design was that under select a region, you have a drop-down menu. And so you have all the regions listed in here, and then we'll go to Southeast. And you'll notice that the color has changed because it's tied to your regional color, okay? So that's the first thing that we did. And the reason that I want to share that with you is because when you select a region, not only in this view, but in any view in this dashboard, is going to change it across. So once you select a region, you'll only see data for that region unless you go back and change it. The reason we wanted to make it across the views is to make it easy for you to navigate, not to go each time select the region, each time select the region, to make it a user-friendly experience for you, okay? So the other thing that I want to point out is that we designed in here, if you see in the gray background rectangles, you see 60x30 educated population, completion, and direct enrollment. Those are what we call our bands or our key performance indicators. They'll let you know quickly the gauge of progress in those 3 target areas. So for educated population, for completion, for direct enrollment, the 2018 data versus the 2030 target, okay? The other thing that we pull out here is that because we want to have this clean look, real estate is really at a premium. So sometimes it might be like, well, how are you getting that data? What does that mean? Well, if you use your mouse to hover and discover, another thing that we built in there are these things called tooltips. So by going into one of these rectangles and throughout the dashboard, you'll see that these rectangles pop up and they have a succinct narrative. So in here, it'll show you the definition, what we mean by 60x30 educated population, and we tie it to your region. So you understand that, for example, this percentage is just for the Southeast, okay? And same thing for completion. What do we mean? What degree levels are we talking about? So you'll find that throughout. Other places you'll find it are in these progress bars. If you wanted to see very quickly, 2015 versus 2018 versus 2030, you'll get that data in there, okay? So now let me show you the third thing that we here to help you out with that.
You faded away, Luis.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So the first thing that we shared with you was the selecting a region. That's one of the first things that we set up here. The second thing is the bands or the KPIs. The third thing are these tooltips. Now for the fourth item, I'm going to jump around just a little bit, okay? I'm going to go all the way to direct enrollment tab. And as you can see, it remembered that this is for the Southeast region, so I'm only looking at your particular data. We also built into the dashboard views ways for you to look at data that was going to be used for self-discovery. And one of the ways that we did that was that if you go down towards the middle where it says select a school district, what this is, when it says highlight school district, this is called a highlighter. And the significance of this is that it becomes a drop-down menu. And all these ISD that you're viewing right now, they're ISDs that are only tied to the Southeast region. So instead of having all the ISDs across the state, we have only the ISDs to your region to make it easier, just in case there's a particular school you want to look for, or if you want to discover what ISDs are in the Southeast region, you'll find them here, okay? So with that being said, let me show you how to use this. So let's, for example, let's just go to Beaumont ISD, okay? Or let me select just the one that might show it a little bit better. Go to Bob Hope, okay? The reason I chose Bob Hope is because you will notice in this graph here, it's called a box and whiskers plot. And for those that are not familiar with it, a box and whiskers plot is a quick way to show comparative data. So we chose this to show the direct enrollment by ISD by year. So you're looking at 2014 through 2018. And down below in the x-axis, we're looking at the percentage of direct enrollment of high school students into higher ed. So the reason I chose Bob Hope is because you see all these little blue dots, right? And they look faded. They look kind of hard to see. But there's one dot out here that stands out. It's Bob Hope. So what the highlighter is doing is bringing Bob Hope to the front and making it darker than the rest of the dots, whereas the other dots are becoming lighter and pushed to the background. But you're still able to see how Bob Hope compares to the other ISDs in the Southeast region, okay? So the reason I'm clicking on it is also to show you, not only will you see the percentage of students who enroll into higher ed, but you also see the numbers. So you'll see hard counts to get even a deeper level of, well, what does this data mean? Someone could be at 100%, but it could be one student. How does that compare to the rest of the ISDs in the Southeast region, okay? And one more thing that we baked into here before I go on to the other self-discovery. If we look at the top where it says direct enrollment from Southeast, 48.1%, you'll see it a couple of other places on this view here. So you'll see it down here in this line graph where it shows enrolled is 48.1%. You'll also see it here broken down by sector type. So you'll see what percentage of students enrolled in an independent institution, what percentage of students enrolled in a public 2-year and in a public 4-year. So you can get that kind of granular data, whether you want the hard numbers or you want the percentages, okay? So let me show you something else that we built in here to make self-discovery a little bit easier. Because oftentimes you may be used to getting just data tables, and whether you're in data analytics, policy analysis, or you're in some other kind of field, doesn't matter if you're a data person or not. When you look at a data table, you try and see, well, what's the meaning of this? How am I supposed to use this? We try to make this a little bit easier for you by 2 ways. The first example is here under 60 by 30 educated population by credential. And you see the credentials broken down over here on the left-hand side. And you see the years on the top. So the first way that we try to make it easier for a table to be read is by the cell color. So the cell gradient, the darker it is, it means the higher that percentage is. So studies have shown that you're just drawn to darker colors. So that's why we use the darker color, and you try to see, oh, well, I see 13% across the board there for baccalaureate degrees, seems to be the highest. Okay, that makes it a little bit easier to read, to compare the different degree levels. I think a better example, because it has fewer data points in there, is the table right below it. So this highlight table is for population of 2018 and 2020 projections for the Southeast region. So we use a cell gradient up top. We used it on the bottom as well. But what you see on the bottom that you don't see on top is the white font color. So that'll even help you even more to understand, like, okay, well, which numbers stand out? And so, for example, we see in the age category of 25 to 34-year-olds, we see under white for 2018 and 2020, those are the highest numbers for that race in the Southeast region. So that'll help you quickly read, and you don't have to be a data expert to see that, and you'll be able to, you know, easily communicate it with other stakeholders who may or may not be data experts. Okay. So those are 4 out of the 5 built-in designs into the dashboard. So I'll stop here for a minute so Elizabeth can kindly share the URL, and we'll give you some time to play around with it. And I'll see if there are any questions in the meantime.
So I've been looking through the chat. We haven't had any questions so far. We have had comments about, there's some concern about the color variations in terms of how readable that is. But also have gotten comments both privately and in the chat that people like the graphics and the data pieces. I did realize one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning. So this is our preliminary version of the dashboards. This link will be temporary. Right now we aren't fully releasing these. We're using this link as a preview to get feedback from users to make sure that, one, that, you know, the data is like what you need to see, that this is answering questions that you have, that it seems user friendly, obviously. And in fact, we're going to ask you some quick poll questions about your thoughts on that. But do please keep in mind this is our preliminary, so we appreciate any feedback that you offer. The link will be still good after today's meeting, so we encourage you, if you have some time, to go back and look and let us know if you think of additional feedback that you'd like to share. And when we're ready to roll out the final link version, then that will be communicated out, obviously, to everybody so that everybody knows to go check out the dashboards. But please feel free to, you know, play around in the dashboards in the meantime and use this link to do so. So if you wouldn't mind, as you're looking through, if you could let us know, do you think that these are easy to understand? Do you find them easy to navigate? Does it provide answers to questions you've had? Because we decided to create these in response to requests for additional data. And then we also have a question about how you might think how you may use these dashboards. So we're going to give you probably about 3 minutes to play around, and then we're going to ask that in that time, can you please give us feedback on your initial thoughts?
And just a reminder, that question is still on the floor of where Southeast falls into the 1 of 4 regions who's had growth in the educated population space. If you think you know the answer, you can go ahead and just say it or put it in chat.
As you're looking for that answer and you're looking through things, if there's something that you really like about the dashboards, please let us know in chat what that is. So we have a question, Luis. Any
Okay.
plans to provide institutional data for each region? Would that be problematic for the larger regions?
Okay, Mark, you are on point here because that's going to be the next dashboard I'll show you, I think in a minute or so once we close the poll for this one. So we'll just put a pin on that if you don't mind.
Yes, you just jumped ahead on us.
So he's engaged, so that's good. All right, and I'll give you guys about 20 more seconds to see if you can answer the question about where does the Southeast region fall in terms of growth for educated population. All right, so let me show you. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, please make sure you vote too. We only have 4 out of 9 people who've responded so far with their thoughts on the dashboards, or excuse me, on the regional dashboard.
So while you're voting, let me just show you. So in the educated population view, you'll see that at the top graph is a line graph that shows the growth or the trend of educated population for your region. In 2014, you were at 32%. In 2018, you're at 38.8%. So a significant jump. Well, I'll take that back. A big jump, a very big jump. In fact, the largest jump in the state. So kudos to you. The other regions who had a growth were not anywhere near as big as the growth you had from 2017 to 2018. So there's something in the water in Southeast Texas. Okay. That's right. You'll take credit for it. You should. All right. So I think in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next dashboard. That's okay. Elizabeth?
Yep, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll.
Okay.
So we can see our results. So it looks like mostly positive feedback. So if for anyone who's having problems understanding the dashboards, I would encourage you to share feedback either in private chat or email or in public chat if you are comfortable with that. And I will let Luis push us on to the next set of tips and our other dashboard.
Okay. So for that, I'm going to go back to the beginning. And Mark, I'm going to use institutional completions dashboard. Well, I think you'll be able to find some of the data that you were asking about. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in full screen view again. And for the time being, I'm really going to jump ahead to public completions by race and ethnicity. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to show you a feature that we have on here. So I'll go ahead and change this back to Southeast. So at the top here where I select a region, an institution, or a year, these are called filters. There's one special filter that I want to make you aware. So it's select value of %. And I think as most data folks, percentages are a little weary because they're like, well, what does that really mean? You know, what are the hard numbers behind that? Well, we'll give you the option of looking at either the hard numbers, which we'll call values here, or percents, because sometimes other people do want to see the percent. So we'll give you the option to have both or choose between both. So here you have value, but if you go down, if you select, it's a drop-down menu, and you have percent. And so now you see the percent, and it's spread across the rows. So for example, public 2-year for Angelina College, we see the breakdown of race and ethnicity for the year 2018. And if you go all the way to the right, you see that it'll add up to 100%. Okay, so it's just comparing race and ethnicity across the respective institution. Okay, another version of that is in the view to the right, and that's for independent completions by race and ethnicity. Oh, sorry, that won't work here because you don't have any independent institutions in your region. But let me just choose one that might. Let's go to Gulf Coast. So not only do you have value percent for race and ethnicity, but you also have it for gender. So we try to make it a little bit flexible if you wanted to show percentage for one, value for the other. However you want to play around with it, we want to give you the option to use it, okay? So those are the 5 things that we built into the design of the dashboard. One was about selecting the region. The other one was about the banners, or the bands, sorry, the key performance indicators. The tooltips was the 3rd thing. The 4th were the self-discovery tools like the box and whiskers plot, the highlight table that you see here, and the 5th one was about selecting the gender value percent, okay? So now let me show you something that you'll get in this dashboard that you won't get in the overview one. And if you go all the way to the left, is this upside down triangle. So earlier I showed you that you could navigate by clicking on any of the tabs at the top, but here you have an alternative way besides just the tabs at the top. This upside down triangle brings up all the views. So you can go ahead and go all the way to the beginning if you wanted to, without having to go across it. So it's up to you. We wanted to make sure that you had a good time using this dashboard. So one of the things that I wanted to show you here as well is that you do have, similar to the overview, you have this progress bar, but this one is just for completions for your institution. And I wanted to show you something. So right now it's on Gulf Coast, okay? So let's switch it to Southeast. And it's blank. It's like, well, what happened? Well, it's still showing Alvin Community College in parentheses. And it's like, well, what am I supposed to do with that? So this drop-down menu, we made it so it could be smart enough to know that when you select a region, it's only going to show options for the institutions in that region. So you don't have to go through a long list trying to find what you're looking for. So let's go to Angelina College. And here's the data for Angelina College, okay? Now let me show you the next. Let's go back to Southeast, go to Angelina College. Now let me show you one of the, so that's the first manual tip that we have in the institutional dashboard, is where you'll just have the institutions tied to the region, where you may just have to select them more than once on the dashboards there. And that's just a Tableau feature that we have to work around with, okay? The second thing that I want to show you that you can do here is that you can actually sort the data how you want to. So for example, if we go over here to undergraduate completions among economically disadvantaged students at Angelina College, the default is that you're looking at this by ascending order in years. So you're looking from 2014 to 2018. If you go to the y-axis, because it has the hard counts, you're going to see a bar graph show up. You can see it here right above 200. So it has 3 lines and then an arrow pointing to the right. That's your sort feature. So by clicking on it, you're going to change the way that this is sorted. It's going to show you now, once I click on it, which year Angelina College had the highest number of undergraduate completions among economically disadvantaged students. And it shows that that year was 2017, followed by 2016, and 2014 was the latest. I'm sorry, was the lowest year in that data set. If you click on it again, it goes back to showing you the default view by years, okay? So that's one of the ways that you can go ahead and sort that if you wanted to do it. I want to show you something.
So Luis,
yes.
We had a question about, do you have to select the region in every page, or can you set it for the whole dashboard?
Okay, good question. So for this particular dashboard, you can set it in completion credential by institution, and and from there on out, the dashboard will remember it for every view to the right of that. So the only place it won't remember it is in the institutional completion by target. And that's just a Tableau feature that we're trying to work around with, okay? So we're here by completion credential by institution, it's Southeast. And if we go to the next view to the right, which would be institutional completion by demographics, you'll see that it's Southeast again, okay? So the other thing that you can do here is you can use the legend in different ways. So let's say, for example, you want to, there's a department in your institution that wants to apply for a grant, and they want to see, well, can you get me data for African-American completions for the last 5 years, but I want African-American completions only. Okay, so what you do is you go to the legend, you click on it, and then it'll show you keep only or exclude. In my example, we'll keep only, and there's your data for African-American completions for the last 5 years for Angelina College, okay?
So what are my options for sharing that data with the people who requested it?
You gotta have a password, no, I'm kidding. So the way that you share it is you go out of full screen, and next to full screen, to the left of that is the download button. So once you click on download, you have 3 ways of sharing this, either as an image, which will be like a PNG or a JPEG, or you have a PDF where you can go ahead and pop it into a report, or you have a PowerPoint, which it'll share that graph. You don't have to rebuild it, and you can send it out to folks. The only thing that you will lose by sharing it this way is the interactivity. It'll be a static image, but I think it'll still do the job that you want, okay?
So why can't I have the data?
The reason you can't have the data is because we include data for the independent colleges and universities of Texas. And we do that for our completion analysis primarily, and some are economically disadvantaged. And so with an agreement that we have with those folks is we can't share their data. So in our scenario, it's either you get it all or you get none. In our case, if we give it all to you, we get in trouble. So we won't do it. We're working around that to see how else we can get downloadable data where if you want to analyze it a little bit more, we'll try to figure that out. Okay. So now you might be thinking like, all right, well, that's cool, but how do I get it back to where it was? So you have a couple of options. You can either be like Homer Simpson and just say, it was like that when I got here, and just blame it on someone else, right? Or you can use your keystrokes. If you're on a Windows environment, you use Control-Z. It typically works. Let's see. Yeah, that's Control. Huh. All right, hold on. Well, it didn't work for me that time. But if you have Windows, you can do Control-Z. If you have a Mac, it's Command-Z. And if all else fails, you can just click out of the dashboard, and you can come back in, and the dashboard will then remember to go to the default view, which is going to be Gulf Coast. Okay. So let me see why. I think it might just be a connection prompt for me. Hold on 1 second. I apologize for that. Okay, there it is. So this is if I had just closed out the dashboard and went back into it. As you can see, nothing's broken. All the data is still there, and it'll still work for me. Okay. So let's see, are there any other questions I can answer at this moment?
Well, I think I interrupted you and you didn't share the exclude feature that you intended to.
Oh, yes, yes, true. Let me do that. I can do it on this view, as a matter of fact. Let me just change the region. Let's pick on someone else besides Angelina College. Let's do Stephen F. Austin. Okay, so here's data, and let's say, for example, someone in your department only wants to know about bachelor's degrees, right? So you go back to this graph, and under bachelor's, instead of saying keep only, you can exclude it, and it's only showing you masters. Okay, there it is. Control-Z is not working for me. It might have just been a little connection or something. So Control-Z, or you keep hitting it back, it's smart enough to remember, like, go all the way back to the default, and that's where it'll stop refreshing or going back to. Okay. And so those are the 5 designs that we baked into the dashboards and the 3 manual tips to get you started. We realized that there's not a whole lot of time for you to get familiar with the dashboards and how to navigate around them and then show other people how to do that as well. So in the works, sometime this summer, we'll try to get a larger training session together where it's going to be filled with data activities. We'll walk you through how to select and find information and then give you some time to go exploring on your own and come back and see how you were able to find the data.
So we are going to give you a couple minutes though to do another poll for us because it seems like people were following along as Elise was going and did get a chance to play a little bit with this dashboard. So just like with the regional one, we would like to know your thoughts on the completions dashboard and whether you find this one easy to understand and navigate, and if it's answering questions you've had, and then again, how you might use that. And then in addition to that, I'm gonna pop a few open-ended questions into the chat box. And if you happen to have, any feelings you'd like to express, we encourage you to do that, but please don't feel like you have to. So basically, if there's something you really like, let us know what it is. If there are, were there particular questions you wanted it to answer? If so, what were those and did it? And any other initial thoughts you might have. So, and as Luis mentioned, we can't download the data because it includes our private schools, our iCuts. Another thing to note is that you may not see all of your high school data in here because we had to limit it to be FERPA compliant.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I forgot, yeah.
So we're gonna give you 30 more seconds. Okay, so I'm gonna end the polling. Oh, looks like we have positive feedback on this one, so that's good. And it looks like people are thinking about ways that it can be used outside of just the regional advisory group. Okay, and then we have a comment from Mark about that in general, that the more the data related to college completion is disaggregated, the more useful it will be by economic strata, race, ethnicity, gender, first gen status, etc. And that's very fitting, right, with what we've been talking about today in terms of, that we need to better understand our students both as groups and as individuals, right? So the more nuanced we have, the better. So we will definitely pass that recommendation along. So I kind of would like for us to pivot gears a little bit now. And I would like to go over basically if you guys have any additional questions about regional efforts in general, and then I have a few things that we wanted to go ahead and highlight and ask you guys about because we thought it would be on your minds. So the first thing is that, in light of everything that's been happening in our, in our higher ed space and in the world today, like we recognize that things are not operating as typical between COVID-19 and then with everything with the Black Lives Matters movement and what's been happening. And I wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that we have created a COVID-19 webpage for the coordinating board. And I have just shared the link for that in the chat in case you're not familiar with it. If you haven't checked it out, I would recommend it. It basically addresses what are the major COVID-related decisions that are being made that are relevant to our state and counties. But it also talks about FAQs for career and technical education, courses, calendars, and reporting, general FAQs, Perk and Grant FAQs, and there's a number of others. And basically what these are facts and questions that have been developed in response to questions we've been getting from the field. So anytime you have a question about how standard operations, for example, are going to be impacted by COVID-19, we encourage you to contact us here at the coordinating board. And we have a committee that's regularly meeting and assessing those questions. And if it's something that seems applicable to everybody, we post it up on the FAQs. If it doesn't, we directly respond back to the requester to follow up with them on information. Right now, all of the information, I believe, is still referring to spring and summer. However, we anticipate having further guidance related to fall coming out soon. And if you have any questions or concerns with that, again, we would encourage you to contact us about those. So I just want to make sure you all are aware that we are taking that into consideration. We understand it's impacting reporting, among other things, and we want to make sure that we're being responsive to your needs. Another topic that I thought may be on people's minds is usually this time of year we have 2 surveys that we ask the regions to do. One is the Regional Action Plan Survey, where we ask you to sort of take stock of, you know, what have you done, what's your plans for the next year, and kind of reflect on your progress. And going along with that, we do an institutional supplement survey where we ask each institution to kind of tell us the same sort of things, and then we also ask about like how far about stakeholder awareness at your institutions and things concerning your regional efforts in 60 by 30 at large. And so one of the things that we wanted to talk to you about is, obviously, with everything that's going on with COVID-19, this year the surveys will be more responsive in terms of allowing you space to sort of reflect on how is COVID-19 impacting this. And we understand nobody has a magic ball. We don't know what's going to happen moving forward, and that can be sort of challenging, right, with planning and with decision making. So we wanted to know, these surveys are typically administered and we ask for feedback by August 31st. Does that timeline make sense for your region and your institutions, or do you think that that needs to be pushed? So I'd encourage you to unmute yourselves and respond, or if you're more comfortable in the chat, please feel free to post in the chat. But go ahead.
Elizabeth, the only thing that gives me pause is we are doing our reaffirmation, and we have to submit our report September 8th.
Okay.
On top of all the COVID stuff we've been having to do. So for that reason, I would hesitate to give you a very confident answer.
That makes sense. And now that you remind me, I recall that I knew that your institution was under reaffirmation right now. So, and I know that's always a big challenge. How about others?
I personally don't see an issue with it. I think surely by then we'll know what we're doing for the fall. So that's my only hang up, is waiting to see how the summer plays out. But
right. Others? Okay, let's see. Mark told us we don't know what the months of July and August will hold, so extended time, please. Okay, and I can tell you from, you know, this is the 5th group that we have done a meeting with, that pretty much there's sort of like it is here. It's well, more time is probably better because we don't know what's happening, because we don't have that crystal ball. But, you know, as Stacy said, it seems like, well, maybe we can make it work depending on what happens. But it does seem like most people are sort of that mindset of, if we could provide a little additional time, that would be beneficial to the institutions in terms of having a better idea how you're moving forward.
So Elizabeth, this is Karen. I don't know how other institutions feel about this, but regardless of when it's due, giving us as much lead time as possible is best. And so even though you're asking us now, if it doesn't come out until August 15th, then that's going to be a problem for us. But if it came out July 1st, then that would, August 31st would be great. So,
Okay.
or would be not great, but it would be more doable with the lead time.
And thank you for bringing that up. We try to make sure that we're always cognizant of that, which is why we usually start talking about the surveys in the May period. We're a little bit farther behind this year because we pushed our accountability meetings later and things due to COVID-19, but we typically try to make sure we give you plenty of lead time so that you can get those answered without it being a rush last minute kind of thing. So thank you for pointing that out. Okay, then my other thing I wanted to address is that, so since we started the 60 by 30 plan, we have talked about 2020 as kind of being a key time that we would sort of take stock of the plan and make adjustments as needed and decide how we were going to move forward. Now, obviously, when we made that decision, we didn't know COVID-19 was coming. I will tell you that the leadership at the coordinating board is looking at the plan and trying to decide whether it makes sense to make adjustments now or to wait. And anything that's decided for that would obviously impact our regional efforts. However, for the time being, we're really just wanting to make sure that institutions are staying focused on supporting your students, which we know you are. So your primary concern should really be about just making sure that those students have what they need, rather than us being concerned about, well, does this target make the most sense, or is this the time to shift targets? So as I said, we are definitely looking as an agency, but there's definitely pause here, right? Because we don't know how things are going to be impacted with the COVID-19. And we just encourage you to please make sure that you continue to focus on your students as you always do. So, and again, that's one of those things where, you know, we want to definitely be cognizant of what's happening for you all in the field. And it doesn't make sense right now for our primary concern to really be about, hey, are we hitting targets? It's about how are we helping students? So, just in case there was any concerns about that, that's kind of where we are with that. I mean, if there are aspects that where the targets are off for your students, we certainly encourage you to share that. If there's particular things that you see as problematic, you know, we would encourage you to share that with us as well. So does anyone have any questions about regional efforts that you're concerned with? And I'm guessing you guys already know that if you have not spent your full grant fund that was due by August 31st, that deadline has been extended. So we did 2 sets of dissemination grants. One was due August 31, 2020. We're extending that out to August 31, 2021. So if you're one of those regions that hasn't spent all of those funds, then you'll have the opportunity to still leverage those. So great, thank you, Mark. So it sounds like your region's already on top of that and you have applied and taken care of that. Well then, if there aren't any questions, then I would like to take this opportunity to invite anyone to share any thoughts they have about the training or about our discussion today. If Claudette has anything she would like to share, since we've gotten this opportunity to reconnect with your region, I would encourage you to do that, Claudette.
I'm just looking forward to continuing to work with this region. I know there's still a lot of uncertainty on the directions and things that we're doing, but I'm looking forward to being involved. I'm glad to see a lot of you on the call today, and be looking out for additional communications from me and our data team.
Definitely. I also want to take this opportunity to thank Rachel for providing the training for us and helping us think more about how we make that transition from talking about equity to moving into the labor of equity. And if anyone has anything they would like to share, please feel free to do so.
Hey everyone, I'll jump in here and just to say thank you again for your engagement and your willingness to reflect on some questions, either out loud or internally. I'm going to drop my email in the chat. Please feel free to email me. I'm always happy to hop on the phone. I know that there's a lot going on right now and I'm here to support.
So I also have dropped in the chat a link for you all, which I have also emailed to you. Rachel asked you to do an exit ticket for her that's really focused on her piece of today's programming. This piece is more focused on your overall thoughts on the meeting today, and we're asking for general feedback on our regional efforts because we're really wanting to try to take stock to make sure that we're doing the right kinds of things to help us move forward and help support you all in those efforts. Okay. Ruby, do you have anything you would like to add?
No, I don't. I just thank everyone for their participation, and we look forward to receiving your feedback.
Yes. So again, feel free to reach out to Luis or myself or Claudette if you have any concerns, any questions, or if you have additional thoughts on the dashboards. So, and we hope that you found this useful today, and thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, everybody.